Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, and I'll call this Monday, October 5th, pre-budget meeting to order, and I'll go around and do a roll call. Councillor Foster?
Present.
Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Present.
Councillor McElwain? Councillor Kittredge?
Present.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Present.
Councillor McCray?
Present.
And I'm here too. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest with any of the items on the agenda under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Okay, seeing none. I have a recommendation that Council of the Township of Center Wellington confirm the agenda for the meeting held October 5th, 2020. Mover for that, Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor Van Leeuwen. All in favor? And that's carried. We have an agenda, no delegations. So moving on to section 5, consideration of reports. The focus of today is looking at our preliminary capital forecast at 2021, 2022, 2023. And we're going to let Dan walk us through. We want to go through those 3 years. We also want to make sure that we're okay with the budget schedule. We already, on September 5th, we looked at some capital projects, so we're not going to re-go over all of those. We have the storyboards, and we don't have the storyboards here today, so we're not going to rehash the projects that we talked about on September 5th. So we'll take it from that point forward. And so I will turn things over to Dan. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Mayor Linton. So for today, we have 6 attachments to the report that we're going to be going through. More or less, most of the information provided to council is in the 6 attachments. Attachments A and B will pretty much go together. Attachment A is the 2021 draft capital budget. There has been changes since the September 8th pre-budget meeting, and those are outlined in attachment B. So Mark will be going through those initially. Then we'll proceed to attachment C, which is the preliminary draft bridge and culvert 10-year plan. That has not changed since our September 8th meeting. We just didn't get to that part of the meeting on September 8th. We ran out of time. So we'll move on from attachments A and B to C to talk about the bridge and culvert plan. From there, attachment D is the 3-year capital forecast. So we've pretty much at that point discussed most of what's going on 2021. So in that case, we'll focus in on 2022 and 2023 and the planned capital projects for those 2 years. As council is aware, those are the 2 years that are given preliminary acceptance as part of the budget process for planning, from a planning perspective to start moving forward with those capital projects. Attachment E is the OLG funding allocation policy. We'll have the discussion there. The big issue there, and you'll see the main reason that there are some significant changes in the 2021 capital budget is because the anticipated OLG funds has reduced since our earlier discussion in the June pre-budget meeting. In June, we are anticipating roughly 1.625 million in OLG funds. We are now anticipating approximately 740,000 in OLG funds that will be received in 2020 and used as part of the 2021 capital budget. Just to give some context to that, the 740,000 anticipated this year is $2 million less than what we received in 2019. And then the last attachment is the revised budget timeline that we want to go through with council as well. So in order, we'll go through attachments A through F. Mark's going to lead the discussion on attachments A, B, C, and D. And then I will lead the discussion in attachments E and F. So with that, Mayor Linton, with your permission, I'd like to pass the floor over to Mark to talk about attachments A and B.
Yeah, that sounds good, Dan. Mark?
Thanks, Dan. So I think where I'll start is attachment B, which should be page 12, I believe, in your agenda package. Dan, are you going to attempt to bring that up on screen too? There we go. Okay, so basically what we've done here is we've taken the balance that was on the September 8th pre-budget meeting for the 2021 capital budget of $13,178,000. And we've identified 6 items that have changed. And we get to the end balance, or the balance that's on the October 5th attachment A 2021 preliminary draft capital budget, and that balance of $11,573,000. So the items that have changed, the first item is sanitary and storm sewer condition assessments. It's $200,000, and that project is required for asset management condition assessments. Basically, in our citywide program, to ensure that our the information is in citywide, is up to date, and is not based on age-based condition assessments. This will be based on the physical condition of the sanitary pipes and storm sewer that will be CCTV. The second item there is 8th line west, Middlebrook Road to Wellington Road 18. It was in the 2020 10-year forecast in the 2022 year. So we've moved it up 1 year. It's $480,000. And in order to accommodate those 2 projects, we moved out or deferred St. George Street East, Herrick Street to Gart Shore Street reconstruction. We deferred it to 2022, and the total cost of that project is $2,115,000, and it's split between road, water, and wastewater as follows. $1,270,000 was the road value, $420,000 was the water value, and $425,000 was the wastewater value. And then the final change, items 3 and 5, or sorry, not the final change, but items 3 and 5 are very interrelated. And that on our September 8th version, we had a project called Tar and Chip Resurfacing, 3rd line, Wellington Road 19 to 1,600 meters south of Wellington Road 19, and Rennie Boulevard. We've since split that project into 2. So essentially Rennie Boulevard cul-de-sac drainage improvements is $50,000. And we reduced the tar and chip resurfacing that was the combined by $50,000. So it went from 160 down to 110,000. So those 2 essentially just offset because we split them into 2 projects. And then the last item is the Fergus Wastewater Treatment Plant digester roof replacement. We reduced it $170,000. Recall we had put it in as a $500,000 top up to the project. Based on council's approval of, or award of the RFP, we've reduced the top up to $330,000, which adjusts the amount available for funding the project to the amount that's noted in the RFP, which is about $2.35 million. So any questions on attachment B before we go back to attachment A?
Councillor McElwain?
Thank you. You split the Rennie Boulevard separate from the tar and chip total. Is Rennie Boulevard still a tar and chip resurfacing, or is it something completely separate? I'm curious why it was split apart.
I think Colin's probably the best one to answer that one.
Colin?
Yeah, thanks. Through Mayor Linton. So it's really the scope of the project is quite a bit different. It's actually looking at improving the drainage within the cul-de-sac area. So the cul-de-sac bulb, there's essentially a closed depression within the middle of the cul-de-sac bulb. So we're just looking at addressing that drainage, and it will be restored with hot mix asphalt. So really the previous description didn't really fit. So that's why we've broken it into two separate projects.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Marilyn. I noticed Councillor McElwain had another question. If you'd like to ask that first, I'm happy to wait.
No, that's okay. We'll just go around. I want to make sure everybody gets the first question in. Councillor McRae?
So my question is more related to what is not there, and maybe I should save it until we go back to look at Schedule A. But I'd just like to talk about the Aloha Center for the Arts and whether or not we could consider having something in under the corporate capital budget, as we have in the last 2 years.
Yeah, so I think to clarify, I think that typically comes from the OLG funds. And I don't know if that's what we're talking about at this point. Can you comment on that, Mark or Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Linton. We will be discussing the OLG policy as part of attachment E. So maybe the best spot for that discussion would be when we talk about attachment E.
Councillor Kittrus?
Are you having a conversation with the CAO in an open meeting?
Excuse me?
Are you having a conversation with the CAO in an open meeting with the mics off?
I asked them a question, yeah, before I answered the other one, before I responded to Councillor McRae, sure.
Is that the proper way to have open meetings?
I thought it was the nature of my question to him was just a clarification question that make it easier for me to answer Councillor McRae beforehand, but if you want to hear all those things, I can keep them on my mind. Councillor McElwain?
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on the tar and chip, I guess, Colin. I've been, and others have been asking for years about using tar and chip as a less expensive way to resurface our roads. And we've always been told no, so I'm just wondering, has the technology changed, or why are we doing it now when we wouldn't do it before?
Colin?
Yeah, thanks for the question through Mayor Linton. So tar and chip is appropriate in certain applications, and so when we're picking whether it's hot mix asphalt, whether it's 100 mils or 60 millimeters thickness, we're really looking to make sure we've got the right fit for the nature of the traffic on that particular road. So tar and chip is a viable alternative where we don't have heavy vehicles using the road. And so we've identified a few locations. We're starting to work it into our pavement process. We definitely have a few tar and chip roads already. Third Line is a current example. And so we're looking at expanding the use where it's appropriate, and typically where it isn't exposed to heavy loads.
Anything else on attachment B? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to point out that on attachment B, there's a deferral of St. George Street East. I'm not in favor of deferring that project. It's one of the worst roads in Fergus. It's literally unsafe almost to drive on. What I'm hearing is because of the OLG reduction that we're going to defer this project. Is there no other way to get that project done? I guess my question is for Colin. Why that particular road, Colin, is terrible, and the water and wastewater as well is old. Like, is there no other way to get that project done and not defer it?
I'm not sure if this is a Colin or a Dan question. I think we all recognize the state of St. George Street, so maybe Dan's best to answer this question.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Linton. When it came down to it, it's all about allocated funding and how much funding we have available to do capital in 2021. at a staff level, we had a discussion around St. George Street and 8th Line, both being in similar poor condition. But it just came down to lack of funding and being able to do 8th Line, which costs less from a tax funding perspective than St. George.
Anything else on attachment B? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Dan, you haven't spoken to the issue of, am I hearing correctly that perhaps Mark as well, the discussion, Mark, you presented to us was loss of OLG funding, and yet our policy is those funds have to be spent in a future year. So in the current year, we'll be spending, I guess I just don't understand why that project in particular was chosen. And I think we really should be getting that one done. The 8th Line potentially could be deferred. It's an urban road, it's dangerous, and those residents have been waiting on that for probably 20 years. So I'm not in favor of deferring that project.
Okay, on to Schedule A, I think, Mark?
Yes, Dan, if you can pull up Schedule A. Okay, so I believe last meeting I went over the layout of this report. I wasn't intending on doing that again unless anybody would like me to. We do still have the strategic plan references there on I guess the second column from the left. A number of these projects, at least half of them, we went through last meeting through the storyboards. And it's not the intention of today to go over those again. I should also mention on the last page, Dan, if you could go to that of this schedule. We do have all of the legend there for the strat plan links. We also have the reserve rec there, and the other column reconciliation, the split between the general capital reserve, the gas tax reserves, and the OLG monies. And one thing we had to do with the move out of St. George Street East, which was our gas tax funded project, we had to reallocate the gas tax to numerous projects. I can list them off for those that are interested. Essentially, it's allocated to the road condition assessment project, the sanitary and storm sewer condition assessment project, 8th Line, the tar and chip resurfacing of 3rd Line, 1st Line, and the trunk storm Moyer Street to the Gorge projects. And Row Road rebuild, Side Road 10. So as you can see, moving out St. George Street meant that we had to then put the gas tax to other projects that essentially would be eligible under the gas tax program. The thought now is that I just essentially open up for questions for any of the other projects that we haven't touched on in the September meeting. If you do bring up a project that we touched on in September, I'll make a note of it. Because I've got circled here which ones we actually did talk about last meeting. So I think if you have any questions about projects, refer to the reference number is probably the easiest, and that's the number in the very first column on the left side.
Okay, questions on this attachment? So who has questions for this attachment, first of all? Just raise your hand if you have it so I can make sure I get everybody. 1, 2. Okay, Councillor McElwain?
Sorry, I'm using a different computer today and it's a little bit different operation, so I'm slow. Dan, it has to do with the, or Mark, I guess, it has to do with the replacement of the roof at the wastewater treatment plant, and I'm trying to find the number again now, but it's the $330 is there, from the previous budget that you presented in September. But the 170, I don't know where it shows up. I found the 330 that has been deducted, but I can't see the 170 anywhere in there that we still have in the budget.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I believe what should be in the September report, let me just double check, should have been 500,000. Yeah, it was item 40 in the September draft that we had. It was 500,000. We adjusted it down to 330, so that's the $170,000 deduction that shows on Schedule B. Is that clarified?
Yes, I just got the two of them mixed up. Thank you.
Councilor Kitchen?
Okay. I have a question about item 29, 36, and 46, which is the phase one Dixon Drive. And my first question is this 1.34 million going to be debt serviced? And what are the payments that would be required from the OLG funds for that? And what is the total OLG funds required for both the land purchase and phase one per year?
Did we talk about this in September?
This was a project that was on the story map.
Yeah, so go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Mayor Linton. So the debt we've already incurred on the Dixon Drive land itself, we pay annually $149,600. So we did make one installment payment in 2020 of half of that, and then we go to full payments in 2021 of $149,600. The full amount of the servicing of phase one, which is shown in the 2021 capital, is projected to be 100% debt financed. Anticipated debt payments are between $90,000 and $100,000 annually, depending on the interest rates at the time.
Any other questions from council on this one? Okay, go ahead, Mark.
All right, so we're done with the 2021 budget then. We want to turn to attachment C, Dan. So this is the bridge plan, and as Dan mentioned earlier, this has not changed from when we met last in September. So I'll just give you a brief run through. The format's exactly the same as the past few years. One important column's at the far left there. We've got our change from prior year final budget. So that'll tell you, so for instance, structure 24WG with a -1 beside it means it moved back 1 year. Okay, so it was scheduled in 2021, now it's in 2022. Okay. We've got the project name, so I'm just working across from left to right. We got the project name, we got the project number, and the project type. So is it a culvert replacement or a bridge replacement or a rehab? And then we've got our 10 years with the timing and amounts for the bridge replacements or rehabs. So go down to the bottom now just to point out. I don't know if you can scroll that up a little bit, Dan. Thanks. So it's just a continuity at the bottom where we've got our opening balance of $572,170, and that will not tie into the final balance from the 2020 capital budget bridge plan. And the reason for that is obviously the bridges that were scheduled in 2020 went out to tender, and they're never going to come in at the exact amount. So things actually worked out well in that the bridge tender for 24P, the Carroll Creek Bridge, actually came in significantly under budget. So those savings remain within this reserve, or within the bridge plan funding structure, and they're now available to use for future bridges. So you start with the opening balance, you then add in your DCL allocation, which is estimated to be about 1.528 million. And we have our OCIF funding allocation of $1,271,559. We don't know yet what our OCIF funding allocation is for 2021 yet. Hopefully we'll find out soon. What we've used is the amount that we were allocated in 2020. If you add the OCIF amount and the DCL amount together, you'll get our magic number of 2.8 million, which is what we capped it at years ago when we started this this bridge plan. So we've just assumed that that will continue across. There's also a bridge scheduled in 2021 and 2022, I guess, 24WG, which has a 10% growth component to it. So that's eligible for DCs. That's what the $20,000 of development charge allocation is. And then out of that, you've got to pay for the bridges that are scheduled in 2021. So you end up with an ending balance of almost 1.3 million. That number gets carried forward to 2022 opening balance, and so on. You'll see that we have left balances at the bottom of each year. Our guideline that we try to give Public Works when they go through prioritizing these is that we want to try to keep at least a buffer anyways of a couple $100,000 at the end of the year. And the main reason for that is to offset any contingencies that may come about. Also, when you get into doing the pre-engineering, who knows what you may find when you start doing some test drilling and get into the waterways. You may find there may be a red side days type incident or situation. If you want to go to the top now, Dan, I'll just point out a couple items on here. Yeah, so that very first line item, the $265,275, that is an internal debt repayment for a loan that was taken out from reserves, I guess 3 years ago for the replacement of Bridge 27WG. So the original internal loan was 1.25 million, repayable over 5 years. So 2022 is the last year of that repayment. The next two line items, bridge repairs and remediation and pre-engineering. There were some details provided on that actually with the September package, but the bridge repair and remediation, that's actually for one bridge. It's the Washington Street pedestrian bridge, I think it's structure 12N. And pre-engineering is basically working on the bridges for 2022 for the most part. So getting EAs in place, design, and so forth. So the bridge for 2021 is structure 4G, 5th line, and also some further pre-engineering and design on structure 24WG, which there were some EA costs and so forth in 2020 as well. I think at this point, I'll just open it up for questions.
Questions from council? Councillor McLean?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I guess the first one is using development charges. We, the township, are charging every existing house owner and every future house owner in the center of Wellington 15% extra taxes each year. that was supposed to total 2.8 million per year for bridge repair and replacement. And adding in development charges to me is above and beyond, and it shouldn't be. If we're going to use development charges, then we deduct money from the bridge repair reserve. We'll put money back into the bridge repair reserve. We shouldn't be exceeding the 2.8 million. That's what our asset management program called for. That was the first thing. And then on top of that, you say in your write-up that you provided that dedicated capital levy funding is shown reaching pre-approved maximum levels and will increase beyond 2021 through assessment growth. The assessment growth shouldn't be going into the bridge repair fund. It should be going into our regular tax base, not in the bridge repair. We have a 2.8 million maximum, which is what was asked for and what council has given you for the last 8 years, 7 years. And going beyond that is beyond what was requested and what was approved.
Dan?
Thanks, Mayor Linton. Councilor McElwain, in terms of your first question, we have 2 bridges within the 10-year plan that have development charge funding. Those are for components of the bridges that we are increasing the level of service, or we're increasing the type of bridge being provided because of growth within the township. So that, in a sense, the development charge components of those bridges are not funding the replacement of a like-for-like bridge. They're replacing the bridge with something that is higher in terms of quality or service than what was there previously. So it's going above and beyond just the straight replacement of the bridge. So that is the justification for using development charges for those 2 structures in the 10-year capital forecast. In regards to your question regarding the dedicated capital levy, increasing the amount of funding provided through assessment growth is just our way of saying when new residents come into the community and build new homes and start paying property taxation, they will also be charged the dedicated capital levy rate that other residents are paying within the township. So in a sense, we're allowing the dedicated capital levy to grow by not increasing it on existing customers, but or existing residents, but increasing it through new residents coming into the township. And that allows us to keep up in some sense with inflationary adjustments that are made to the cost of bridges and culverts going forward, so that we don't fall behind in a funding perspective.
Other councillors have questions on this one? Councillor McElwain?
Thank you. So just to clarify, Dan, this assessment growth that you're referring to of new homes coming in, yes, of course, everybody's paying it. As I said, every homeowner that exists and every homeowner that ever will be in Center Wellington is paying an extra 15% taxes because of the bridge surtax. But is it going to remain at 2.8 million, or is, as new homes come in, is that 1.528 million going to increase? It should not. I mean, 2.8 million was the target, and it is, we've reached that point. And so as new homes come in, it should alleviate any the costs on existing homeowners, but it shouldn't be added to the total being charged or to being included in the total.
Dan, go ahead.
Through Mayor Linton, staff are proposing that we add to the dedicated capital levy through assessment growth, so that the dedicated capital levy rates being charged to existing residents where their assessment does not change they would not be, their dedicated capital levy would not increase or decrease going forward. That we would add to the amount of dedicated capital levy coming in through assessment growth, where new residents would start being charged the dedicated capital levy on an annual basis.
Other questions from council? Councilor McLean?
So you're telling me that, well, I mean, we've already been, every new homeowner in the last 7 years has been paying the dedicated capital levy. Every future homeowner is also going to be paying the capital levy. Is the capital levy going to go beyond $1.528 million? Because that's not, the 2.8 was the cutoff. That's what we agreed to. And to add to it, we would have to go through the whole process again and get approval to add to it.
Do you have anything else to add to that, Dan? I think you answered the question.
Yeah, I think the answer to the question is that staff are proposing that the 1.528 million increase by the impact on assessment growth every year.
Okay, thanks very much. Councilor Kitchus?
Thank you, Mayor. So from just to follow up on Councillor McElwain's questions about this capital levy, what will be the increase in the capital levy each year with the assessment growth? How much more are taxpayers adding to that?
Do you understand the question, Dan?
Through Mayor Linton, that's something that we don't know yet at this point. It'll all be based on what assessment growth ends up being on an annual basis. Like, as an example, one of the early pre-budget meetings we had estimated assessment growth at 2%. So from a regular levy perspective, that means the tax base increases by 2% before any increases occur on the existing residents of the township. So that same effect would happen on the dedicated capital levy side, where the base dedicated capital levy would increase by 2% assessment growth before any other potential impacts. And going forward beyond 2021, we're going off of the council approved recommendation that there are no further additional increases to the dedicated capital levy. So this 2% adjustment for assessment growth in 2021 based on current estimates would be the impact in 2021.
For those of you that may not have been able to hear, Mayor Linton has taken a 5-minute recess while we check technical difficulties.
Okay, back in business. Everybody's unfrozen. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know what's going on with my computer's just freezing up, so hopefully we're good for the rest of the meeting. So any other questions with regard to this 10-year plan? Okay, I have to reorient myself because all of you have changed the Brady Bunch squares. All right, Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I have two questions for Mark. Mark, I received a telephone call from a constituent this week, and he pointed out to me that his bridge levy is $110, and his total taxes for the township are $1,000. So once again, 110 on his levy on taxes of 1,000. Could you help this resident understand how 110 is 2% of 1,000? Because he'd like to know. He'd like a straight answer. He told me he was told the levy was 2%, and he rightly pointed out that $110 is not 2% of 1,000. With the benefit of this resident, Mark, could you give us a straight answer?
Yeah, that's not the kind of question that our staff have to answer. You know, if they want to set up a meeting with our staff would be more than willing to walk them through the numbers, but it's not for a council meeting. Who else had a
There's
question?
nothing wrong with that question. That's a fair.
There's several things wrong with it. Councillor McLean?
Thank you. I have to go back to the question again, Dan. First of all, 2% assessment growth is pretty small if we're going to meet our growth targets. So I don't believe that that number is enough. But even if we're only using a 2% estimate for assessment growth, why doesn't it show up here on the bottom line of the chart that you provided and show that at 1.528 has gone up to 1.6, et cetera, all the way across, so that we see what we're really planning on spending on bridges over the next 10 years.
Go ahead, Dan, if you have anything new to share.
Thanks, Mayor Linton. So 2% on the dedicated capital levy of 1.528 million comes out to roughly $30,000. We did not show assessment growth as an increase in the dedicated capital levy allocation within the bridge plan because we didn't show inflationary increases on the bridges and culverts either at this point. If we needed to inflate the entire schedule, we would have to inflate the capital costs on each bridge and culvert over the 10 years. So we decided to keep it in uninflated dollars in 2021 dollars, so that we're at least being consistent on that front where we're not showing the inflation on revenues and correspondingly not showing the inflation on the capital costs. And just another point on the dedicated capital levy, like it's from an inflation perspective, it's been in place since 2015, and the $2.8 million ceiling for the bridge plan was established as part of the 2015 budget. So bridges and the cost of bridges and culverts have gone up significantly from 2015 to 2021, and that's just an example of the inflationary impact of not increasing this every year by assessment growth.
Any other questions from council? Councilor Petrus?
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Dan. I don't understand when you say that it's a 2.8 ceiling on the dedicated capital levy. But now you said just previously, my previous question, that it's 2% increase. So which is it? Like, is it the 2.8 that's going to be capped, or is it always going to be increasing 2% or the development growth each year? And if it is, that goes contrary to what we originally agreed to with the 2% levy, like annual levy to 15% or whatever it is. And so I'm just wondering, that's a whole different project. And are we going to be discussing that further?
I just wanted to clarify something before we go too much down this road. Back in 2015, we moved forward with the dedicated capital levy. And one of the principles that we had is that we would be doing this until 2021, where the 2% would be reduced, and then 2022, when there'd be no additional 2%. And so that's the number that was communicated out from day one to all our residents. And we're following along with that. All the other numbers that you're throwing around have been internal numbers, but what we've communicated to the public is that there was a stop to the increase in 2022, and that's what you're seeing here in this chart. Anything else to add, Dan, or is that been answered?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Linton. Just the reference to 2.8 million, that's the combined dedicated capital levy and OCIF funding that is allocated to the bridge and culvert plan. As Mark mentioned in his presentation, we don't know what the OCIF funding is going to be going forward, so that's something that we'll have to continually address in each budget with council. The 1.528 million is the dedicated capital levy for 2021. So that's a piece of the $2.8 million, which is the combined dedicated capital levy and the OCIF funding. And yes, this will ultimately be a decision of council, whether this number increases by assessment growth or stays at 1.528 million. And that's going to happen annually as part of the budget process. So we're in a pre-budget meeting now. We'll be in budget deliberations later to finalize the budget, and this is the time to change that.
Any other questions from council? Councilor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I note that in 2015, this government went to the people and told them of a 2% surtax on their taxes. That has since grown, and through 2018, Mayor, you went to the people again and told them of a 2% surtax. And here today, we're finding out that it's not 2%. Mayor, you also went to the people and told them that the capital levy would be eliminated. And I'm quoting you, the levy will be eliminated after 2022. Today, we're finding out it's continuing. Today, we're also finding out you're disallowing questions on the subject. My question is to you, Mayor, why are you misleading the taxpayer in this way and understating the levy and understating the fact that it is not going away in 2022 and beyond? Why are we misleading the people like this?
Your comment is out of order. And I'm not going to respond to any of the other questions that you made because they don't make sense, frankly.
They make perfect sense, Mayor. They make.
Councilor McLean?
Just a correction, we didn't say that it was going to be ending in 2022 when it started. It was going to go for 10 years before, because it was before OSIP.
2022.
It was going to go for 10 years before OSIP was announced in 2015. So it went out to 2024. And it was going to 2.8 million, and the 2.8 million was based on an asset management plan, which includes inflation. So I still don't agree that we should be including or adding assessment growth to that 2.8 million. That's the number that we agreed to in 2014, and that's the number we should be going forward with forever. And it is forever. I mean, it's 15% now. It'll be, it just keeps growing every year with or without it going to add assessment growth to the number. It goes on everybody's taxes one way or the other in the bottom line. It's just a matter of, do you assign it to bridges or not? And I'm saying, no, it shouldn't be assigned to bridges. There are other things it should be spent on, and keep people's taxes within a reasonable amount, and not add more to the bridge levy.
Any other questions? I think we've exhausted this topic. Any other questions from council on this? Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, moving on to attachment D. This is a 3-year capital forecast, so it looks like Dan's pulling it up right now. So as Dan mentioned earlier, every year, well, for the past number of years anyways, we've had council approve a 2020, basically the next year's budget, capital budget, and give pre-approval for the following 2 years. So in this case, when we get to budget approval, we'll be approving 2021's capital budget, giving pre-approval for 2022 and 2023. And the main reason for that is so that staff can proceed with planning those projects and have them essentially shovel ready in the year that's budgeted for construction. So with the layout of this, unfortunately in the budget program, we can't get a nice funding layout between internal and external funding sources for the 2022 and 2023 year. But our thought was, as we go through by page on this, if there's any questions on anything to do with 2022 and 2023 projects, ask, and the managing director will speak to the nature of the project. And while they're doing that, I will go into the budget program and try to dig out how we're proposing to fund that project, be it by DCs or gas tax slots, what have you. Yeah, and then on the last page, there is a total. And the one thing that we have left out of this is the corporate operations facility. It was in the 10-year capital forecast at $6 million. The plan is that staff will bring forward a report that will speak specific to that particular project. And at that point in time, decision will be made by council what year to put it in and what the amount, estimated amount will be, if any. And the one, I guess, good thing about it is it was set up in the budget program as being fully funded from debt, which means it will not take any money away from any other project that's funded from tax sources or water, wastewater sources. So with that, I think what we'll do is, I think the easiest thing to do is just, if you can go back to page 1 of this 10-year or 3-year forecast, Dan, and if there's any questions on the first page.
Okay, so let's just confirm we know what we're doing here. Attachment D, and we're going to go page by page. So first page, the bottom of it is page 1 of 5, the bottom of it is total health services. So any questions for the 3-year capital forecast on the first page? Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Marilyn. One question I have is related to new photocopiers. Do we typically purchase or lease them? And then my other is related to the council chambers. Could you please explain what's involved in the audio video equipment replacement for 2022 and 2023?
So Mark, are you going to try to take a first stab at these questions and then pass it off?
Well,
sometimes you know a little bit more about the program, but you can tie in the finances. Then if you pass it off, feel free. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can
Okay.
take a crack at this one anyways. With the new photocopiers, I believe these, we put a 5-year life in the photocopiers. We do purchase them, but we do it by way of an internal loan from our reserves. So those photocopiers were actually due for replacement, I believe, in 2021, and we've deferred it actually 2022 because the ones we have right now are working fine. And we'll reassess next year as well. If they're still working fine and we're not, absorbing repair costs that are significant, then we'd probably push that out another year. Hopefully that answers that question. The second question was to do with the audio video equipment replacement. I think, Dan, you may be better to speak to that one. This essentially is just replacing the audio video equipment in the council chambers. I'm not sure what particular pieces they are, though.
Yeah, that's Just recently, we replaced the microphones in the council chambers. So this is looking at the rest of the system. It's just upgrading it due to the age of the system to make sure that we can continue to live stream and have the appropriate audio and video within council chambers. So it's just due to aging of the existing system.
But the new microphones and stuff, they're staying. It's just the other component. Okay, great.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, any further questions on page 1?
Yeah, I'm going to just go around the room here. It's a little easier. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on the corporate side on page 1. And looking through the entire budget document, Mark and Dan, I'm looking for an item about the cultural heritage landscape study. The reason I'm asking is on August 28th, we had an update to the 2020 growth plan as at August 28th, and we're not in compliance, is my understanding. And I'm wondering if we're going to be bringing our own plans into compliance with this amendment. So I guess my question is are we prepared to put an item in there regarding cultural heritage landscape studies into that budget on the corporate side there?
I think it would probably come under planning, wouldn't it? Mark?
Dan is actually highlighted there. It's just in the studies category.
Oh, yeah, it's right there. And
In 2022.
Fourth
I think we have
line
subsequent.
down.
I think we have subsequent phases as well. I'm just checking now.
Dan, I think that answers the question. It's right at the top there. Councillor Van Loo?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, my question probably on page 1 would be in regards to for fire services, the 8-seater van. Is this something that was on our vehicle replacement that we're looking at, the replacement of the minivan, or is this another new one? Because I know they bought a minivan a while back. And will that be reassessed at that time again? Thanks.
This is a new van, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 100% DCs. Just double checking that now.
I know we bought a van a while back with DCs, and I was thinking, is this a replacement one from the one previously, or is this a second one?
This is a new one, and it is 100% DC. I just confirmed that in the program.
You want to add to that?
Yeah, so this is a new van. I guess we're in a bit of a challenging situation in that as we are preparing to build a third fire station, we are adding personnel as per the master plan to our team while we are waiting for that building to come online with all the trucks. So when they respond to a call, sometimes there are more personnel than fit in the trucks. So this is to respond to calls when we have additional fire persons needed at the scene, and they will not all fit on the trucks that we currently have. And also to move staff to training. This is a gap that we're finding right now. So the new fire station would be operational in 2028, according to the 10-year plan, and this van would be in use until that time.
Councillor McLean?
Just a quick question on the future fire hall land purchase. Has there been a location identified, or is this just kind of projection of buying it, don't know where? Do we know how much, et cetera, et cetera? How big a lot do we need for a fire station? That kind of question.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. That is a opportunity to have in the budget enough funds for approximately 2 to 3 acres of land. No, it has not been identified as far as a location. There is a preferred area by where we would want to purchase it, and looking at purchasing it in time to inform new recruits so that they are within the boundaries of living within a certain area of the new fire station prior to being built.
Councillor
I think
Kittrus?
I answered all those questions.
Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question about that very same thing. So that's land purchase, but it's also a general question about the other pages. I'm wondering if any of those funds for the land purchase is coming out of OLG funds. I noticed that the 3-year plan has capital levy OSIF funded projects outlined separately. Are there any projects here that are being planned for OLG funds? And what's the projection for OLG funds in the 2021, 22? Considering that we've just had a radical revision of our projected revenues.
Mark?
So I will mention that the funding for the land purchase for the future fire hall, the 600,000, is 100% growth related, so it's all development charges. So there is no slots money and so forth that would go towards that. One thing I should note is that, again, we go back to, we have basically a pool of money that's made up of gas tax, general capital reserve money, and slots money. And that's essentially what gets put towards a bunch of these projects. So have we assigned slots money to a specific project yet for 2022 or 2023? No, there's no point in doing that yet until we get a better idea what the firm projects are going to be. Because first of all, you always want to assign your gas tax money first. It has the most restrictions placed upon its use. And then we look towards slots money second to apply, and then general capital reserve typically applied to the residual. So I don't know, Dan, do we have projections for 2022 for slots money? I know that from the standpoint of what we left in 2022, we did reduce requirement. Right now, it's sitting at about 3.6 million that is required for 2022 from general capital reserve, gas tax money, and slots money. It might be a little bit optimistic, but again, who knows what will happen with COVID and when that facility be fully operational again.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We, as I mentioned earlier, we're planning on proceeds of 740,000 in 2020, and we received 2.74 million in 2019. So until we get into 2021 and we start collecting proceeds for the 2022 capital year, we won't really get a true understanding of what the OLG proceeds will be in 2021 for 2022. We're just anticipating at this point is it'll be somewhere between the 2019 and 2020 proceeds. So we'll have more on that as we get it from actual proceeds received from OLG.
Councillor Dunsmore?
The only question I had, I found the answer to, and that was the termite program is in there on page 1. So I got no other questions on page 1.
Any other questions on page 1, Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I already asked my questions.
Okay. Okay, moving on to page 2. Go ahead, Mark.
Getting that on screen, I think the only thing I'll point out here is that we do have the category there for the capital levy OSIF funded projects. Those should match, and they do match, the bridge plan that was in attachment C. So those are all self-funded by that bridge plan through OSIF and capital levy money and a bit of DCs.
Okay, we've talked about the bridge section already. Moving on to page 3. Questions on page 3? Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. One question I have is related to the St. Andrew Street Tower Street to Bredalbin streetlight electrical repairs. What does that entail? Is that new light standards or replacing with LED bulbs? Sort of curious.
I think Colin is probably best to speak to that one.
Oh, I was hoping you'd take a stab at it there, Mark. I was gonna see how good you could do.
Not this time.
That's right.
Colin, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark, thanks, Mayor Linton. Yeah, so that one is essentially a continuation of an existing capital improvement project that we've been working on in downtown Fergus. It's essentially, it's not the streetlight standard itself, but it's the electrical connections between the streetlights that we're looking to replace. Existing conditions are that the electrical wires are just direct buried beneath the sidewalk, and they're, you know, over time exposed to the conditions, they're corroding and kind of wasting away. So basically, this project replaces all those electrical connections between the lights. We're putting them in proper ducts, so they're a little bit protected from the elements, and that'll improve the reliability of those streetlights downtown.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, one thing I should mention on this one too, it's 100% funded from a streetlight reserve that we have, so it's actually not taking any money from our usual pot, which is general capital reserve, gas tax, and slots.
Thanks for adding that, Mark. Councilor Dunsmore?
Yeah, my question would be for Colin. There's a couple of places here, sidewalk repairs and replacement, 2022 out to 2030, and then further down, sidewalk replacement 2021. Where can I go to find a list of what sidewalks are going to be repaired? Because I'm getting calls from people about the sidewalks on their streets, and I'd love to have a list like we have the bridges, you know, where I could say it's going to be done on this date. So that's question one.
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So yeah, we essentially we do annual inspections. So the minimum maintenance standard requires that municipalities do annual inspections of trip hazards, what they call discontinuities within the sidewalk system. And so really the list gets informed by those annual inspections. Quite often you'll see we're highlighting trip hazards in certain locations. And so that list is generated annually. But certainly if a resident has a concern, or if there's a specific location, you know, they can get in touch with myself or our office, and we can kind of give them a rough idea of whether or not it's on the list. Yeah, but it's not something that we tend to publish, because it is a bit of a fluid situation. Things change fairly quickly, especially over the winter times, and we're always trying to hit those high priority trip hazards each summer. So, but yeah, we'd be more than happy to talk to any residents that are getting in touch with you, Councilman Dunsmore.
Great. And follow up, Kelly, if I could, Your Worship.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Dunsmore.
Mark, either Mark or Colin. Mark just mentioned the lighting reserve. I've had several residents complaining that the lighting on their street isn't enough. I've gone out and had a look at it, and I think I had Colin, some of your people go out and have a look at it. So I'm wondering, what's the process for getting another light standard in an area that's particularly dark?
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So yeah, again, if there's a concern, I know, you know, we've had some discussion on one location in your ward, Councillor Dunsmore. But yeah, if there's other locations, we can certainly check. There's I think a few locations where we're in the process of putting up additional streetlights. But generally we're trying to, we did a report to council to try to fill it, this was a few years ago, to fill in areas where there were gaps in the streetlight network. And so we would really rely on that evaluation just to see, okay, is it trees that are kind of blocking the light that maybe need to be trimmed? Or is it maybe an alignment of a streetlight and maybe the direction of it? And, you know, of course, if an additional light is required, we put that in. But we want to evaluate those other considerations beforehand.
Councilor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. Are we on page 3 or 4?
We're on page 3.
Okay. I don't have questions for page 3.
Councilor Mack?
We actually skipped half of page 2. The bridge and stuff only goes down halfway and then starts in a bunch of other things. And I do have a question on page 2. And although I know that the corporate operations facility is not included there because it's debt finance, I was just wondering about the $500,000 study that was approved last year. Is it still planned for next year, or I mean approved for this year? Is it planned for next year based upon that budget, or is it canceled completely until we actually get a report from on the needs requirement, or where does that one sit?
Dan, can you respond to this, or is this an Andy one? Colin's got it? Okay, Colin?
I can respond, and Dan and Andy can add in if they choose. So the capital project identified for 2020 was really to look at the detailed design of a future operations facility. But of course, first we wanted to get council approval or endorsement on the preferred option. So we haven't proceeded with that. I think as council will recall, that was one of the projects that was put on hold in the early stages of the pandemic, and so we've picked that up recently, and we are looking to report back to council in the very near future. So I think that's the response that for now that component of the project has been put on hold.
So nothing will happen to that project until it comes back to council.
Correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Van Leeuwen?
Thanks. I only have one question. That's on page 3, which was about St. Andrews Street. So I gotta find it back here. Oh, sorry, St. David Street North and St. Andrew up to Garrett Francis Street, 301-0254. Do we have funding coming in? Are we still applying for what's that funding again? Through the province for Highway 6 going through.
Oh, Connecting Link funding.
Connecting Link, thank you.
Yeah. Colin?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Through Mayor Linton. So we are getting organized, I think, to submit an application for Connecting Link funding. And so for the section of St. David Street, just north of the intersection of St. Andrew up to Edinburgh. And, we really need to pin down the design, I think, before we can apply for funding. If there's interest in improving the streetscape in that area, particularly between St. Andrew and St. Patrick, or St. George even, this is the time to do that. And so I think we're going to spend some time in the next 12 months, because typically the applications are each fall, really pinning down the design and what the township, what council would like to move forward with in terms of streetscape design. Whether this is really the opportunity to make any tweaks to that road cross section through there. Of course, we'll have to have discussions with MTO in terms of what they would allow through there as well. But if we are looking at this as from staff's perspective as more than just a paving project, that we are planning to do the water main and replace the sanitary sewer. The storm sewer from our condition assessment is in decent condition, so we'll likely be leaving most of that. But really the decision point is what kind of road cross section do we want through there? Do we want to make some changes? Because really this is the opportunity. So definitely application is going to be pending, but we really wanted to pin down the design before we submit an application.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, Colin. Would we anticipate going after about 90% of the funding? Is that typically what we go for with MTO, or what's the deal there?
Absolutely. So it's 90% of the road related costs. So asphalt paving, road base. So MTO will cover 90% of those costs. But if we are looking, if the township is looking at doing streetscape improvements, maybe it's a wider sidewalk, maybe we're looking at planting some trees. That's probably not eligible costs. We still need to discuss with MTO, but we're thinking based on our experience with the St. David Street Bridge, there's a pretty clear line in what is considered eligible costs and ineligible costs under Connecting Link. So we want to explore that in more detail and make sure we've got a better understanding of what would be eligible versus ineligible costs under Connecting Link.
Thanks, Colin. Councillor Foster, any questions for the second half of page 2 and page 3? Anybody else have any last comment on pages 2 and 3? Councillor Kitchus?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm going to go back to the second half of page 2. I realize that the corporate operations facilities is not there, and we're waiting for the needs assessment report. I'm wondering how much has been spent on the needs assessment report and whether we need further funds for that.
So let's be pretty quick on this one because there's no action that's going to happen, so it's on hold. So there's no decision that we're going to have to make. So if you can answer the question in a sentence, then that's great. Dan, can you answer that, or Colin, in a sentence? Okay, we'll report back on that one if it's going to take one of that. We really want to stay in scope of the projects that we're actually moving ahead on. Councillor McElwain?
Thank you. I guess this is for Colin. The bridge and culvert structure inspection coming up in 2022, Colin, is that kind of a full list of all bridges and culverts in the township, and will it create a new priority list? Because we haven't had a priority list showing up for the last couple of years, so it's we have a list, but it's not prioritized like it used to be with 1 to 40 or whatever the number was at the time. Just wondering if we're going to get a new priority list out of the new bridge replacement or structure inspection.
Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we did an inspection just this year, actually. So it's every 2 years. 2 years we're required through regulation to inspect all structures, whether they be bridges or culverts, with a 3-meter span or greater. And so yeah, I know we haven't presented the what we've, I guess, referred to as the kind of the Christmas tree table, where we've got kind of a multicolored coded priority listing. But essentially every year we get new condition data. We are updating that table. And really things haven't changed too drastically in terms of what the priorities are. As the high priorities get done, they're obviously down to the bottom of the list. And the ones that are high priority, they float up to the top of the list. So we haven't really been presenting that. Nothing. It's not like we're seeing some bridges kind of leapfrog over other ones when we do the updates. But essentially, yeah, in behind the scenes, we're still updating that priority table. But it's basically reflected in terms of the timing within the bridge plan. So.
But just to confirm, Colin, we always have a priorities list ongoing. That's not new, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So each time we get new bridge condition data, so that gets plugged into our priorities table where we're analyzing, which priority for each structure. We do that risk-based calculation each time we get new condition data, and then we have that information, and that informs how those bridges are placed in the 10-year capital forecast.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else from pages 3 and the second half of page 2? Councilor McWayne, one last question.
It's just a comment, actually. I found that what you call a Christmas tree list to be quite informative and useful. So if you could bring it back, it would be, I think, useful to those members of council who haven't seen it in the past.
Okay, Mark, page 4. Anything that you wanted to highlight, or should I turn it over to questions?
You can just turn it over to questions.
Okay, questions from council
Maybe
page.
get it back on screen, though.
Oh yeah, pull it back on screen. All right. Questions from page 4. Councillor Foster, anything? Councillor Van Leeuwen? Councillor McElwain, anything on page 4? Councillor Kittredge, anything on page 4? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Kittredge.
Thank you, Mayor. I have some questions about the water taking permits and the F2 well additional capacity. Are these additional funds to the millions of dollars we allocated last year for the F2 well?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, they are top-ups. And the way you can tell top-ups is if it starts without a year in front of it. So that project number of 330, that in most cases means it's top-up project. If I recall, the F2 well additional capacity is just based on the water supply master plan study that was done. So that's where those amounts are coming from. Colin's probably better able to speak to the water taking permit license renewal piece, though.
Yeah, if you have anything to add, Colin, anything new that wasn't in the water supply master plan here?
Just to echo Mark's comments, F2 was identified in the water supply master plan, so we're moving forward with the replacement project there, and also at F5 at the base of the Scotland Tower. So looking at new replacement wells, and that work's ongoing. And then the permit to take water. So we've submitted our work plan to the ministry back in June of this year for our permit to take water renewal. So part of the conditions of our existing permit is that we'll have to update our wellfield capacity assessment, and which is a fairly large undertaking. It's going to require, I think, additional monitoring locations, and it's going to require pumping tests in Fergus and Aloha for both well fields. And so we've submitted our work plan to the ministry. It's currently being reviewed, and we do expect to receive comments on those fairly shortly. So, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Kittredge, follow up?
Thank you, Mayor. What is the total for the F2 well additional capacity? I guess this is for Dan or Mark.
Mark's jumping all over it. Mark?
I just dug the numbers out. So yeah, basically in prior year budgets, we approved $634,000 for F2 well additional capacity. And then if you add on the 408 and the 291 over the next couple of years, it give you a total of 1.333 million. So those numbers again came right out of that water supply master plan. And the total for the water taking permit license renewal, 300,000 exists right now. So you got an additional 300,000, that'll give us 600,000 total. And I should mention the F2 well additional capacity is all proposed to be debt funded.
Councillor Dunsmore, anything from page 4? Councillor McCray, anything on page 4?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Just this question is for Colin. Just related to the water taking permit license renewal, when you discuss the additional well capacity assessment, is that going to be replacing the earlier Golder study that was done?
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. Yeah, exactly. So that's will be an update to that report. Essentially, it'll follow a very similar process. Recovery of the groundwater levels within Fergus and Aloha, and then a pumping test to draw down the water levels and kind of determine what the specific capacity, I guess, at each well location will be. So it's so we want to make sure it really ties into the replacement wells at F2 and F4. We're hoping that we can incorporate those replacement wells in that well field capacity assessment. Also, there's a rehabilitation of existing wells that is another capital project that we are looking to implement before that well field capacity assessment. So, yeah, they're all kind of interconnected in a way to that field capacity assessment, which likely will happen. I don't see it happening in 21, but we will likely see it. Probably some of the groundwork will likely be drilling wells next year, new monitoring points, but the well actual testing will likely occur in 22.
Any last comments or questions on page 4? Councillor McElwain?
Thank you. I noticed I missed a note to myself the previous. You have a column at McNabb Street water main replacement in 2023. Is that just water main replacement? Because there's no sign of a road rebuild at the same time, or so that's not standard, is it? Normally, don't we do everything at once?
Yeah. Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. So at this point, this project is strictly a water main replacement. We do not have a tax-supported component to, I guess, urbanize the streets or add sidewalks and storm sewers. Right now, from staff's perspective, it's a water main replacement only at this point. Yeah, it would be a very big tax-supported item to insert in the budget if it was to go otherwise. But at this point, it's being proposed just as a water main replacement.
Councillor Kitchus?
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if I could ask for a closed meeting to ask the next question. It's about 2020-008.
2020-008. Well, I'm just going to confer with our clerk for a sec and see what make sure that my process is made on this request. Okay, thanks for letting me converse with the clerk and the CAO about that, because that's not a usual request in the middle of a meeting. So what I ask you to do, Councilor Kittredge, is for you to connect with the CAO after this meeting and identify why you want that to be in closed meeting, because we have to have a reason behind it, and then go through the process. And then we can, if the reason is a legislatively good reason, then we could add that to the next agenda for our next council meeting. Otherwise, because we're live stream, we'd have to close the meeting off, we'd have to lock everybody else out, and it'd be a significant amount of work to do that in the middle of a meeting. So that's the process that we'll take there. Okay. Any other questions for page 4? Okay, moving on to page 5. Anything, and the last couple lines of page 4, we're in Parks and Rec section right now. Anything that you want to point out there, Mark, before I turn it over for questions?
No, not really. I think we're fine just to go ahead with questions.
Okay. Okay. Questions on page 5, mostly Parks and Rec related. Starting with Councillor Foster. Anything, Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is regarding the Aloha Community Center ice pad replacement. We undertook about a year ago to do a study with the various sports groups regarding turfing that facility, and now we're budgeting to replace it. I note this year that the Western Ontario Athletic Association has canceled hockey for the year. That means no Aloha Rocks. I see a diversion there where we're going to go ahead and replace the floor, and yet we're also undertaking to do a study to turf it. Can I get some clarity on that, Pat? Why would we not wait to see about turf rather than going ahead to replace the floor now?
So you asked this question, a similar question a while ago, and I'll let Pat correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard her say last time he asked the question is that we're not looking at turfing the Aloha Community Center. The ceiling is too low to allow for that. And the answer that she provided to the first part of your question is now would be the best time to do the changes to the Aloha Community Center, because then we could be able to be ready for the next full season. So is there anything to add to the answers that you provided last council meeting, Pat?
No, that's an accurate summary.
Councillor Van Leeuwen?
No, nothing at this time. Thanks.
Councillor McElwain?
Thank you. I have a question about the neighborhood interconnections line item, Pat. There's nothing there happening next year, and I don't think anything happened with neighborhood interconnections this year. That's the same program that has been ongoing for a few years now, I think, is it not? And has there been changes made, or is it still kind of trying to tie all the paths and sidewalks and everything together? And I'm just curious. I haven't seen anything about it for quite a while now.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Yes, you are correct. That is the intent of the project. And the reason you don't see any funding in 2021 is that some of the work that was intended for this year was not done. So there's enough money in reserves. I'm thinking Mark can tell us how much that is. So we still have that money to spend in 2021. Due to COVID, a lot of projects were delayed or moved forward. So we will be doing work next year. We just don't need additional funds in 2021. We anticipate needing additional funds in 2022 and 2023. So that's why there is $150,000 in each of those years. I'm not sure if Mark has the total for you.
He might. His hand's up. Mark, what do you got there?
Yeah, there's about $112,000 sitting in that project right now.
Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions on this page, but your explanation of the closed meeting, item 2020-08 is an area where we have to purchase. So that is why I am asking that question about a closed meeting. And if that is not a good enough reason, then I just, I'll contact the CAO, but I think that is a good reason to have a closed meeting.
Yeah, I didn't suggest it wasn't. I didn't know what the reason was, but the process that we'll take is the way I laid it out. Contact the CAO who will talk to the clerk, and we'll get something put on the next agenda so the process can work and we can make sure that all councilors are invited to that session. Councilor Dunsmore?
Yeah, my question, Pat, is regarding the water trailer, 2010-161. Is that a new water trailer or is that repairs to the existing water trailer?
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Okay, yes, so that is an additional water trailer. So we will now have 2 water trailers in function as the downtown beautification expands. We need to expand the amount of watering we're doing, so we need a second trailer.
Also, can you confirm that that's not that fancy water buggy? That's a water trailer that you use to water the plants with that long stick on the end. It's not the water buggy, right?
Correct. It's a wand or a stick. And yes, that's what it is for. It is for watering plants in the downtown areas.
Thanks. Mark, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, since we're basically going up one in the fleet, it's 100% development charge funded.
Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I have 3 questions. I think these are for Pat. The first one is the multi-use courts in Aloha. Where are they going?
The location of those courts has not been determined yet. That would be something we would discuss at the CSAC committee. So we have the funds set aside here to build the multi-use courts, which are for tennis and pickleball, but no location has been identified yet.
Okay, thank you. My second question, the Hoffer Park washroom. So you're proposing a separate building somewhere near the park?
We're looking to build a park to support the tourists in Victoria Park. Since it's not really realistic to build in Victoria Park, we're looking for an adjacent location, and Hoffer Park has been identified as an opportunity for that. So as we move closer to that project, we do have funding from the RTO4 project to do some consulting on that project and also the design of that project. So we'll be bringing that back as that moves closer to the time frame when we would be building it.
Thank you. And then my last question is the Confederation Park improvements. What does that entail?
So that was a project that we actually have moved forward, those 2 parts of the funding, because there was funding in 2020, which did not get completely spent. The goal of Confederation Park, sort of rehabilitation, expansion of that park, is to reimagine how it can be used, to expand the trail, lengthen it so that it is greater connectivity, and also to create more space for activities in the park, not a playground or event venue, but opportunities for small groups to gather, maybe a small group of entertainers, but it is not to be like a large event venue. So we're working through this year, we were to work through improvements to the current existing park as well as survey work, which we did get started, but due to the lack of parks staff this year, we did not get the work we had hoped to get done on the improvements in that area. So we will pick up that project next season and spend those funds. And then the additional funds are dedicated mostly to expanding those trails from end to end to connect the two streets.
If I could just ask one final question. So when you say connecting two streets, which two streets are you referring to?
I'm going to lean on the CAO because I'm forgetting one of the names of the streets that it connects. It's been a request of the Fergus BIA to connect that park to the downtown. And that is, I'm going to turn that over to the CAA, but that is the goal, to bring that park into the fold of the downtown, the takeout restaurants, the tourist attraction for Fergus.
Thanks, Pat. So the intent is, and we do have a right of way in behind the township sold the pool building. So along the river's edge, we have a right of way there for a trail extension. We're working with the church property next door, Queen Street Medical. So we'll be connecting the trail that ends typically right now at the end of Queen Street to the east, and then connecting all that way down through to David Street, St. David Street.
Any last questions or comments related to page 5? Councillor Kitchus?
This is, I think, for Mark, or maybe Dan, and it's the last item, which is the barrier-free path of travel in community service buildings, and it's $245,000 in 2022. I'm wondering, what exactly is that?
It's probably better for Pat, I think, to talk about that one.
I had my hand up, Mark, too, but then I saw your hand go up. I thought, great, Mark's going to answer this one. So with the accessibility, Ontario Accessibility, anyways, the AODA requires that by 2025, our buildings meet the standards for accessibility. So this funding is to complete some of the identified projects that we need to do to accomplish that. We have been getting some work done at Bellwood Hall, as well as at the Aloha Community Center, to identify some projects. We also have a project in the hopper to improve the accessible washrooms at the Sportsplex. We have done work on doors and ramps and other things to ensure that we are going to hit that deadline. So we typically have money each year put aside in the barrier-free path of travel, and we work through those projects. It's once again, where in 2020, we did not complete all of the projects. So we have some funds left to spend on those projects in 2021, and then additional funds in 2022. And then we hope that we will be where we need to be, but we will bring that back to council if we are not meeting the standard.
Just if you could remind us, you mentioned a deadline, Pat. What's the deadline?
The deadline for the province is 2025.
Mark, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just mention that right now there's $230,000 sitting in a project that exists for doing that work.
Anything else from page 5? Okay, Dan, we're on attachment E.
Thanks, Mayor Linton. Attachment E within the report has the OLG funding allocation policy. Just to give some highlights to the policy that was put in place basically a year ago, and I'm referring to bylaw 2019-41. All OLG funds received by the township are kept in an interest-bearing reserve fund. Any OLG funds received in a calendar year shall not be used to fund eligible projects until the following calendar year. OLG funds will be used as through the annual budget process. And a year ago, we came up with an allocation of OLG funds to use on an annual basis. And that was 88% of funds going to the OLG capital reserve, to fund township capital projects, and that's to a maximum of $2.2 million. An additional 5% being allocated to an arts, culture, and heritage reserve fund to be used on specific capital projects or program costs excluding payroll relating to arts, culture, and heritage within the township. And then the remaining funds are being allocated to the Economic Development Reserve Fund to be used for economic development related costs within the township. If you look at within attachment E, the last page, and I'm going to share my screen just so that we can have it up. We did an allocation analysis showing actual OLG proceeds received in 2018 and 2019, as well as anticipated OLG proceeds for 2020. And using the existing policy that's in place right now, you can see that total proceeds received in 2019, as I mentioned earlier, is 2.74 million. That gave us the maximum allocation of OLG to the township capital project reserve of $2.2 million. 403,000 made its way into the economic development reserve fund, and 137,000 in the arts, culture, and heritage reserve fund. Also mentioned earlier, we're anticipating 2020 project proceeds to be approximately, OLG proceeds to be approximately $740,000. And you can see the allocation impact at the top of this analysis in green: 651,200 going to township capital, 51,800 going to economic development, and 37,000 going to arts, culture, and heritage. Also, within the body of the report for today, it shows that there is a little bit of unused OLG proceeds from 2019 that went into the 2020 process, which gives us 672,100 for township capital, and that agrees to the number that Mark showed from attachment A to this report. $46,040 for arts, culture, and heritage, and $331,920 for economic development. So staff are recommending, given that the proceeds are relatively small this year in comparison to other years, and doesn't really have a significant impact on any of the three core categories within the existing policy, staff are recommending that this policy be continued forward for an additional year so that it can be used as part of this budget, the 2021 budget, and then we would bring the policy back for review as part of pre-budget for 2022. Just because, like I said earlier, we're dealing with much smaller proceeds than we would normally receive, and it makes more sense to review and evaluate this policy when we have a somewhat normal year from an OLG policy perspective. So with that opening, I'd be happy to address any questions that council may have.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dan. And when we talked about revisiting this policy last year, nobody knew that we'd be hit by COVID and numbers would be significantly smaller. We thought we'd kind of have more of a typical year, and we could identify whether or not this policy was actually working. So staff's recommendation to hold it steady this year, I can appreciate that. That makes some sense. But I want to get thoughts from council on that one. So let's go around and give us your thoughts about holding the policy steady for one more year. And then hopefully next year we have a little bit more of a regular year. Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Marilyn. I guess I'm torn. On the one hand, I understand the reason to continue going with what we've identified, the 5% for arts, culture, heritage. At the same time, going through reviewing the budget so far, the one thing concerns me is that we don't really see anything listed for arts and culture. I know the previous 2 years we've been supporting the Aloha Center for the Arts, and I'd like to know that we're going to continue to do that in this year as well, because when I look at the 2013 Culture Action Plan under places, one of the recommendations is provide support in the development of existing non-municipal cultural spaces, facilities, improve function and viability, including but not limited to capital investment, grant supporting, in-kind support, and partnership opportunities. I think in this particular year that we're all suffering under COVID, we need to ensure that we're able to keep our arts and culture groups whole where we can. So I'm just putting a plug in for arts and culture.
Yeah, Andy wants to respond to that. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Councillor McRae. The funding that has gone to the Aloha Center for the Arts, as well as last year the Scottish Festival, did come out of the OLG allocation. It just happened to be the last 2 years. This year, the Aloha Center for the Arts received the entire amount from the OLG funding, and last year it was split between the Scottish Festival and the Aloha Center for the Arts. So that's our challenge this year, is the fact that the funding coming out of the OLG revenues is substantially lost, as Mark highlighted, down at $57,000. So that's our challenge in looking at additional funding sources.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, I share Ian's concerns, although allocating it the way we had decided on an allocation percentage basis that we thought was reasonable, without having knowledge that the numbers would drop drastically. But it would still be done on a percentage, and carrying the policy forward using the same percentages is pretty much fair to everybody. And I think once a budget is presented, we'd have to have a discussion based on that 37,000. If it gets divided between different groups, then it really kind of has a huge impact on the Aloha Center for the Arts. We'll have to wait to see who else. I think we should leave the funding formula the way it is.
Councillor Kittrus?
Well, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of concerns, not just for the arts and cultural heritage funds, but for the economic development funds. We are incurring more debt, but we don't know what the OLG funds will be next year to fund the debt. And if they go up to 2 million, we'll only be getting 140,000 for the economic development. Arts will get 100, which is close to the thing. But the economic development, we've imposed and we've allocated it to fund the debt. So I'm just wondering if it's wise. I mean, last year they got $403,000, and this year they only got 51. And so I think this actually needs to be looked into, because I am actually concerned about going ahead with the phase one if you have another poor year in the OLGs. And so without talking to the OLG organization to see what are their projections, we won't know what our projections is, and I think we need to know that to decide this policy. I'm concerned about having made those commitments. So can somebody clarify for me how we're going to make those commitments?
Andy's going to speak, and I think Dan might want to add something to that. Andy?
Just speaking, it's a great point, Councillor Kittrus. We have reached out previously to Elements about their forecast. As a private company, they will not share those forecasts. They do not share those forecasts even with OLG. They are, like us, hoping that they have better returns in 2021 than they had in 2020. We've had meetings with all the mayors and the CAOs with OLG, and all are feeling the same way. The larger casino operators and larger municipalities are even heavier hit than we are. So at this stage, everybody's just hoping that things are able to return as quickly as possible in 2021. But I don't think anybody's looking at getting us back up to 2.7 million in 2021. I'll let Dan speak to the cash flow with regards to the land development.
Thanks, Andy. Through Mayor Linton, staff are working on a cash flow analysis of the Economic Development Reserve Fund, and we're going to bring that forward to council as part of budget approval. So you'll see all of the proposed inputs and outputs over a long extended period of time in that reserve, just to make sure council is comfortable with the OLG proceeds going into the reserve and the debt payments coming out of the reserve. So council will get a chance to look at that at a future budget meeting before you adopt the 2021 budget.
Following Councillor Kittrus.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to motion to defer this decision till we get that analysis.
Yeah, okay. Defer it till you get the analysis. You want to, any time frame that you want to put that to?
Well, I don't know when they're thinking of having that analysis ready for the budget. Is it November? Because that'd be fine to do it in November if that's what they're saying. I have some questions about the schedule, the budget schedule, but I'll leave that for that. So I'm hoping.
So you want to defer a decision on keeping the policy the same until
information.
Yeah. Okay, you moved that, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor of deferring this decision? Okay, and that carries. So this decision on keeping the policy the same has been deferred. Staff, are you clear on what we're waiting for? Yes. Okay. So let's move on to attachment F, because there's nothing else to talk about as far as attachment E goes, because that's been deferred by council. So moving on to attachment F, and that is the dates and the timing and description of the budget process. And so we've laid it out because I hope council appreciates that COVID has made it a little bit difficult for staff to hit the timelines that we typically hit. We had pretty aggressive timelines for our budget, considering that we're doing the operating and the capital now together. And we have been pretty aggressive in the past to try to get it done by December. But staff have come with a recommendation to push that out a number of weeks. Less than a month, a number of weeks, to ensure that they had the ability to complete this, and that we had the consultation discussions that we needed to have. So they've laid out the schedule. Dan, do you want to speak to the schedule before I open it up to questions from the council?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Linton. Just some of the changes we made to the schedule itself. We removed the budget public open house, just obviously with restrictions due to COVID-19 and the issues around having an actual meeting. And we've moved to more of a process through Connect CW, where we would have a recorded presentation with staff speaking to that presentation on Connect CW, and then a number of questions and answers, and the ability for residents to provide input on the budget process. And we're proposing that be opened mid-October and closed mid-November, so there'd be about a month there where residents could provide some input into the budget process. We're also proposing adding an additional pre-budget meeting on December 1st. This was a date where we originally had blocked off for budget deliberations, so it would just transition to a pre-budget meeting with committee of the whole, and we would allow budget delegations from members of the public at that meeting to speak to council on the budget and move from there. The budget book being available, rather than November 20th, we're suggesting December 21st, so roughly a month later than proposed. Budget deliberations would then happen the first week of January, January 5th and 7th, with budget approval at a regularly scheduled council meeting on January 18th. So it does defer budget approval to mid-January, but it really only delays our process by a couple of weeks, given that Christmas and New Year's falls between the gap there. And it really would provide staff with some extra time to pull together the budget process, all the different documents and presentation for council this year.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions or concerns from council as far as the budget schedule goes? Start with Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. In general, I like the timeline, except for one thing, which is, Dan, I know you're proposing to have a draft budget book ready on the 21st of December. My sense is that we really should have that in early January so that a full 2020 actuals can be used and tabled in the budget draft. So I'd like to make a motion that we amend this recommendation so that all dates would be pushed forward approximately 15 days so that the budget book will have 2020 actuals in it, and that it be tabled in the first week of January. I'll use January the 5th, and then we review it for a week and start our meetings on the 12th or perhaps the 19th. The reason I'm proposing this is so that the budget draft has 2020 actuals for each line in it, rather than using as at November 30th, which is not a complete year. So I'm moving, Mayor, that we amend the dates by 14 days into early January, and there's very little impact on deliberating on the budget. It'll still be deliberated on in January, as it is currently.
I'd like to ask if we can hear from everybody, and then if your motion still stands, then we'll move it. Is that okay, Councillor Foster? I really would like to hear what everybody else has to say about this.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Sure it is, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm good with the schedule. It's fairly typical. I know we've fallen back, but yet we're actually still quite a bit earlier than we used to do it. I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, so we're quite a bit ahead. I am curious, and maybe can we actually get our year-end financial actuals in that quickly when the close of the year? Normally, it takes a little while to get those out. So that would be my question, to be able to vote on Councillor Foster's motion. I mean, to back it up 15 days wouldn't really help if it's something. I know for us, when we get our financials for our companies, it almost takes 2 months after the year end for us to actually get our year financials closed. So it's just a question. It'll just help me in the vote coming up. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. Can Dan or Mark respond to that? That would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Linton. It typically does take us a number of months to finalize a year end. So by delaying a number of weeks into January, wouldn't necessarily provide that much more accurate of financial information from a historical perspective. So I don't think that would provide what Councillor Foster is looking for.
Okay, keep going around the room, and then we'll get back to this, because I do want to hear from the other folks about this one. Councillor McElwain, on the schedule.
Thank you. I kind of agree with what Councillor Van Leeuwen said, that I don't think that we have any more data a week later than we would in December 21st as far as the draft budget is concerned. My concern actually goes back to the Connect CW plan, and I'm just wondering, does council have an opportunity to review or comment on whatever questions are going into the Connect CW? Because depending upon how the question is worded, the answer becomes quite different. So I just like to make sure that if we do not agree 100%, that our opinions are recognized.
I'm going to turn that over to Andy to respond to.
Yeah, so as part of the presentation, we're going to do a PowerPoint that we voiced over. There will be our regular questions that we've been benchmarking with residents year to year, commenting on where they want to see dollar figures spent more or less in. And then there will be open spots for residents to ask their questions or give their opinions, and all of that will be summarized and provided to council as part of the summary presenting our budget to council.
Councilor McElwain, follow on?
So I think, Andy, what you're saying is that council gets no opportunity to input to the actual Connect CW piece that's going out to the public. Is that correct?
Yeah, we consider the presentation that more operational.
Okay. Councilor Kitchus?
Thank you, Mayor. This is an unusual year. This year is not like our regular years. We've had a lot of budget constraints and budget concerns. I know for my own business, we put together numbers fairly quickly because we do everything every day. And we have a program that we can get our financials to the bank probably by January 15th. I mean, to the accountant, not to the bank. So I do feel, as I felt last year, that getting as much of the actuals is, it helps in decision making. As it stands now, the motion that I made previously, it looks like that'll be the December 1st to make that decision. And I think that we'll need the extra time to get that book together and make the results work. Otherwise, I don't know what date you're going to be using for the budget book if the decisions on December 1st are different. So I sort of feel like having it extended is wise, just particularly for this year.
Councilor Dunsmore?
Yeah, just for clarification, when we get the CW XCW presentation, we'll get a list of the questions that were asked, and then we can address those questions in our deliberation on January 5th and 7th. I think we'll have those questions before that to give a chance to review.
So the intent is that the questions will go out on CW Connect as part of the folks listening to the presentation. They will ask, able to ask questions of staff, as well as we have some of the regular questions that we've been asking a number of years with regards to various department budgets increasing or decreasing. All of that will be summarized and provided to council, and I believe we've tried to present that to council as part of our budget presentations. We may be able to turn that around and bring it into the December meeting. If not, it will be at the January meeting, but it is there for guidance for council to hear what the public has commented on.
Yeah, Councilor Dunsmore.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear because I have had some people that want to be delegations to the budget. So when would they be allowed to come to the council meeting? Would that be the 5th or the 7th? January 5th, they would register as a delegation for the budget? Correct.
They would register as every year we've had a pre-budget meeting where residents could come and delegate to the budget in advance so that council will be aware of those prior to us even getting into the final budget discussions.
Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I agree with Councillor Van Loon in terms of it's pretty difficult to get all of your financial information together within 15 days after the end of the year. That never worked with the company that I worked for. Otherwise, the schedule, I'm fine with it. I like the fact that the public gets a full month to review the budget presentation and to provide feedback. I think the other thing too with the revised schedule is it's going to give us more time to figure out the impact of COVID. I mean, what we're hearing is we're going into a second wave, so what that impact might be on our operations, it'll be interesting to see if anything else comes forward as a result of this delay.
Yeah, thanks, councillors. And I will get to you in a sec, Councillor Foster. I do think we have to push ahead and get this done as soon as possible. If we did postpone it, that means that we wouldn't get the budget out till February. And I do think that's pushing it. You know, I don't mind the few weeks longer because I think that's needed. But if it doesn't do the trick in providing us with better information, pushing it out 2 weeks, I'd be in favor of the schedule as it is. So, Councillor Foster, did you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to point out, I'm not asking for audited financials to be ready in January. We have never prepared our budgets with audited financials. We have always used year-end internal figures. So to suggest that we can't do this because we won't have audited financials, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about using, as at December 31st, our own internal numbers, just as we will use probably as at November 30th when we prepare the budget and table it on December 21st. So I'm not asking staff to do anything different that they're not already doing. We're just pushing it ahead so that we're using our internals as at year end. That to me is the way it needs to be done, because then you can see the actual spending for the entire year. To suggest we can't do this because we won't have audited financials is not, it's inconsequential. We've never had audited financials when we're deliberating on our budgets. We never get the financials until June.
Okay, so there's an outstanding question that I think staff have to answer, and then I'm going to let you talk your motion. The question is, will we have better financial information? Forget about the audited side of it. Will we have better, more accurate year-end information if we push this process back 2 weeks? I think that's the question that councillors need to really understand in order to understand if this will make a difference. Can you answer? Is that a fair question to ask Dan or Mark? Yeah, Mark?
I'll take a stab at this first, Dan, and then you can add anything else. Just off the top of my head, basically pulling together the draft budget after year end, I think the biggest additional piece that would go into the actuals would be we'd have most of the labor in there. There may still be some kind of wage accrual that needs to be calculated and done, but most of the wages would be in there, and wages are close to 50% of the operating budget. There's still a lot of things that may not have been submitted by then. So invoices for advertising, we may not have all that. We may not have all the consulting type invoices and so forth. We may not have all the meeting expense requests from councillors. There's a number of things that we could be missing, but we would have a better number or a better handle on what all the labor costs were at that point in time, if you were to defer it a couple weeks.
Dan?
Yeah, thanks. Just to add to what Mark is mentioning. Yes, we would have slightly more information on operating results for 2020, but we do continue to receive invoices in over January and February that would not be included in the analysis. As well, there are a number of year-end entries that are made that are significant from a capital and an operating perspective that would not be in the analysis. So I guess the short answer is it would be slightly more accurate, but not to the point where you're seeing somewhat accurate year-end numbers.
So that's good. That's what we needed to know. So Councillor Foster, it's kind of in your court. I don't want to not allow you to make a motion. So if you wanted to make a motion, now's the time to do it.
Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion that we defer all dates, my motion is to amend the schedule of dates by 14 days so that the budget book would be tabled in early to mid-January. And we meet 7 to 14 days later to deliberate on it so that we have full internal year-end results reflected in the draft budget. So that's a motion to amend.
We have. Okay, so that takes us out of the scheduling portion. So I have a number of recommendations here. It's all pulled into one. I'm going to read it, and then
we didn't like. Where's the seconder on that? I was going to second that, so I didn't see you ask for that.
I asked for a seconder, and nobody put their hand up.
No, I didn't hear that.
I must have been on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, Kelly, you were on mute. I was trying to send you a message.
Sorry. No, I can't do 3 screens at once. Sorry about that, Council. I thought I asked for a seconder, but I was only asking myself, and I didn't second it. Yeah, so Council Foster put that motion on the table. A seconder for that motion? Council Kittrus? All in favor of Council Foster's motion? Opposed? And that motion fails. Thanks for alerting me to that, Councilor Kittrus. Okay, so we have a series of a recommendation here, Section 5, regarding the 2021 preliminary capital forecast. So I'm going to read the recommendation. That the Council of the Township of Center Wellington direct staff as follows, as per report COR 2020-56 dated October 5th, 2020. Include the 2021 preliminary draft capital budget and the preliminary draft bridge and major culverts 10-year plan in the 2021 draft budget. What about the second one? Yeah. Include the 2022 and 2023 capital projects in the 2021 draft capital forecast, representing years where staff is given pre-approval to plan for future capital projects. Skip the next piece because it was deferred. And that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve the revised 2021 budget timeline as outlined in report COR 2020-56 dated October 5th, 2020. Mover for that recommendation? Councilor Dunsmore, seconded by Councilor McCray. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Kittrus, seconded by Councilor Van Leeuwen. All in favor? Opposed? And we're adjourned. Have a great rest of the night.